Hi, this is Steve with SV Panope, and today we're going to talk about anchor shanks. We've got three popular anchors here, all in the 20 kilogram range. The Manson Supreme, Sarka XL, and the Mantis anchor. This is a micrometer. I'm going to put it on the shanks of each of these anchors. This one reads 0.62 inches. The XL is thinner. Reading comes out to be 0.47, and it's the same on the Mantis, 0.47 inches. Next, I'm going to read shank height, and the location that you choose to measure shank height, it's going to vary how much your reading is because these are tapered. I've done the math here, and I've done it here, and I've done it at other places, and this works out to be the weak spot. This anchor is certainly not weak, but that's the weakest. And the numbers that I come up with, I get 4¼ total inches. But then I subtracted out the airspace here, and I come up with a reading of 3 5/8 inches in total metal in height. On the Excel, I did the maths for this location and this location, and I come up to be possibly a little bit weaker in this spot. You get more height here, but you have a longer lever arm. That's the basic maths for choosing these spots. Here I have 4 inches. Mantis, same thing. I chose some arbitrary spots, but did the quick math, and for this anchor, height there was 3 inches. And now we'll talk about the shank length. So from this point all the way out there to the end on the Mantis is 26 inches. On the Excel, it's 23 inches from my height measuring point on out to the end. And on the Manson, it's only 17 inches from its weak point out to the end. So I've done a very simple beam calculation, and we're talking about a cantilevered beam that's being deflected in this direction. We're talking about bending anchor shanks, in case you hadn't figured that out. And it's pretty simple maths. The length and the height, those are both a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning if you get twice as long, it's twice as weak, and if you get twice as high, it's twice as strong. Conversely, the width, it's a little different. That acts by the square, meaning if you double the width, you'd actually get 4 times the strength. So it's all still real simple maths, and I'm not actually going to go through those numbers, but I've given you all the parameters. All you engineers out there, you can run your own numbers if you want. But the way I calculate it, it's very simple. This anchor is 1/3 the strength as the Manson Supreme. This anchor is about half the strength of the Manson Supreme. The Manson and the Excel both use the same very high quality metal that is rated at 780 megapascals. The Mantis also uses a very high quality metal, but it is just slightly less strong. The manufacturer claims it uses 690 megapascal metal. You may find someone who says, I want the strongest shank possible. I want to set my anchor in front of a hurricane. I want the winds to veer 90 degrees, and I don't want my shank to bend. I'm not going to argue with that. If someone wants a strong shank, wow, this is the one. I would trade a little bit of shank strength from this anchor in exchange for a little better resetting ability in my tests. I think there might be a trade-off here. I think it might be that if this shank didn't weigh as much, the balance of the anchor might just be improved to the point where the anchor will reset reliably in my tests. And I intend to find out if that's true. I have removed the material of the shank above the rock slot. The anchor previously weighed 47 pounds, now it weighs 42 pounds, so we lost 5. The tip used to weigh 11 pounds in this setting position. Now it weighs 14.5 pounds. So the tip to total weight ratio increased from 23% to 33%. The anchor still retains great strength. I have done some quick calculations, and the Manson Supreme in its modified condition is still quite a bit stronger than either of these two anchors. The Excel comes in at roughly 60% of the bending strength, and we're talking about bending anchor shanks in the lateral direction. The Excel is about 60% as strong as the Manson in its current state, and the Mantis, which previously was less than 1/3 of the bending resistant strength of the Manson, it's improved now. It is about 40% as strong. So the Manson is still an extremely strong anchor. I would have no problem trusting my boat with it. If you recall, the shank width is wider than the other two, and it's got similar height with a shorter lever arm. So it's still a very strong anchor. Obviously, I've changed the Manson. This is really no longer a Manson Supreme Anchor. I want to I feel bad for the Manson company. I have no problem with those people. I haven't had any contact with them, and I do believe they build fine products. And I don't want my modification of their product to appear like I am giving them a reprimand. Certainly, they had their reasons for building this anchor as strong as they did, and I'm not challenging that. I'm mostly here just to experiment and test my theories, and if I can improve this anchor to the point that it meets my expectations of what I want the anchor to do, I may just keep this and use it. But for the time being, we're going to consider this a test anchor. It's no longer certified, and it's really no longer our Manson Supreme. Okay, let's dive right into the test of this modified Manson Supreme. This is my sand and mud combination seabed, my most common test site. I'm in 26 feet of water. I'm using 105 feet of road, and with my bow roller figured in, we're at 3.5 to 1 scope. So here's the initial set. We're looking right down the anchor. This is a slightly different camera mount angle. I'm just experimenting, trying to find the best view for checking out seabed and what's going on. So I've power set the anchor in reverse each time after each of these rotations. There's the first rotation. The anchor listed a little bit, still's listed, but it rotated and remained buried. There I'm power setting, and I'm not going to show you each one of these power sets just for time purposes on the video. I'll just show rotations at this point. So here's the second attempt or second rotation, and unfortunately we don't get to see much, but we're confident that the anchor is on its side and dragging. Just let the tape roll here and see what happens. And there the anchor rolls upright and stops the boat. So it's a pretty good drag. That was about 30 or 40 feet on my GPS. But that's not acceptable. I would have preferred to see that anchor set much quicker than that. And here's the power set. It is indeed holding the boat nicely. Okay, here's our third reversal test. So I'm just driving the boat back and forth up over the anchor, and that one rotated perfectly. That was a textbook reset. Here's the fourth. I'm driving the boat up and over at my normal 3.5 knot speed. And here, this last one, here's the fifth rotation. And that also stopped the boat perfectly. So now I've slowed things down. Now I'm going to use 2 knots for these next 5 passes. You can see the chain ghosting by on the left there. So I'm going by at 2 knots, and it's a bit more gentle, perhaps a little bit more realistic in the real world. There's a nice reset. Seventh pass overhead. There's a good stop after a short drag, and the 8th reset. This one drags a little further. and stops the boat. Okay, 9th reset. Bit more of a drag. This one I figure was about a 20-foot drag. Hard to know for sure. I'm just going by my GPS and the amount of time it takes. Again, this is a lot slower. During these drags, it's actually less than 2 knots. But the anchor did reset, and then here's the final. Here's the 10th one, and I believe this one, yeah, this was a good, solid rotation and immediate reset. Here's on the retrieval. The anchor was extremely well buried. It did come up initially with a pretty good glob of seabed. It's covering the entire fluke, it appears. Packed in around the base of the shank as normal. Now I'll stop the motion here just so we can see. I don't see anything touching the roll bar there. No evidence that it was jammed in there. I don't see any residue at all. Here's another still of the other side of the roll bar, and then finally when we're out we'll see still quite a bit of seabed, but it's trying to fall away there. It's clearly not jammed in around the roll bar. Okay, we're back in the workshop with the modified Manson Supreme. I believe the resetting performance has been improved. It's not perfect, or I should say it's not as good as some of the other anchors yet. And my new theory, or my next theory I want to test, is anchor tip shape. We can see the anchor tip is not touching the table. It's actually touching back here. I intend to grind this off and maybe reshape the way the tip has been ground. Okay, let's zoom in and see how the tip came out. The tip is now touching the table. I ended up grinding a bit off the top of the fluke, but I left the majority of the original bottom grind on the fluke, so we kind of have a hybrid here. We've got 2 grinds. Notice that the fluke is thicker here in the toe than it is in the rest of the fluke. What they've done is they've stacked 2 layers of this material and then welded. In my removal of this shape here, I have removed a lot of the weld. So this is a little bit weaker, and if I decide to place this anchor in regular service and pursue regalvanizing, before I do that, I'll grind this area back even further and then re-weld it in the manner that it was originally. Okay, let's test out that latest modification to the Manson Supreme. I've reground the tip into more of a point shape. We're at the same seabed as previously. It's the sand-mud combination site, 26 feet of water, 3.5 to 1 scope. Here's the initial back down, and this is just about a textbook initial set. Just almost immediately, anchor is upright, and then I power set on each one of these in reverse at 3,000 RPM. So here I am on a 3.5 knot wind or current reversal reset test. You can see the chain going by there on the top, and that's just about perfect. Anchor stays upright and stops the boat immediately. Again, here's another power set, and I won't show any more of these just to save time. Here's the second reset. Anchor tips over to the left and starts taking off. Wasn't too violent. I didn't see anything really yanking. But it was too much for the anchor. Again, the assumption is that somehow seabed that collects around the fluke and or the shank, that's my current theory, is somehow disrupting either the balance or preventing the fluke from digging in some way. I've slowed things down so maybe you can get a better look at what's happening around that roll bar. Clearly the seabed is not impacted into it fully. But there, after a pretty long drag, it was about 50-foot drag, it eventually resets. Here's the third reset, and that one was very good. We don't see much, but we assume it rotated. It did stop the boat perfectly. Fourth reset. Rotations. And a little bit of a drag again. Here I've slowed it down. Once again, we see water, sediment, and perhaps seabed passing underneath the roll bar. But here, watch carefully. The anchor is rotating upright right there. And now the camera reorients, and the anchor is resetting. and stops the boat nicely. That one wasn't as long. That was perhaps about a 20-foot drag. And the 5th reset at this 3.5 knot speed. That was a good set. Now I've slowed things down. Now I'm going to go back down to 2 knots on these resets. It's perhaps a better simulation of real life. That was a good solid stop. The boat's, you know, the bow of the boat's bobbing each time these things stop. Here's the 7th. Looks like it pulled out, but immediately reset. Got some better pictures now. Some sediment's gone. The 8th reset. That was just beautiful. The anchor stayed virtually upright. Stopped the boat. Here's the 9th reset. Anchor has a little bit of a list. And stopped the boat here initially. I thought it had stopped it, but now I'm going to let it roll. Look at that clump falling off the back of the anchor there. So I'm power setting now, and this is just backing up with the engine in reverse, not a big yank here. Notice that there's seabed covering that shank. I've stopped the motion, and you know, if that shank was bigger, there'd be more seabed. So maybe if I took more material off the shank, maybe there'd be less seabed affecting the balance. So here I've got it in slow motion as it takes off. It's the engine, or the anchor just starts moving, and once again, we're seeing water, sediment, and all kinds of material passing underneath that underneath the roll bar. It didn't take long. That's less than 20 feet, and the anchor rolls upright and stops the boat. And the final pass, 10th reset, it does good. Stops the boat. On the retrieval, we didn't get any images of the initial part, so there's perhaps more seabed attached then, but here we see a bit left over as it emerges from the water. Well, I had high hopes that my modifications would allow this anchor to set as well as my better anchors. The Sarka Excel, Super Sarka, Spade, and Mantis anchors were all 100% in my reset tests. They did not have to be treated gently. It didn't matter if they flipped on their back, rotated, or fell over on their side. They always reset 100%. It looks like my tip modification was a bust. I did not see any improvements there. It looks like my shank modification did improve things. Previously, with the unmodified shank, the anchor would drag continuously and not reset, where now, at least in all my tests, it does eventually reset, but in my opinion it still takes too long. I'd like to see it digging in a little quicker. It sure appears that the roll bar is not causing a blocking or a packing in of seabed. Time and time again we saw water passing through, sediment passing through, and in that last series on the 9th reset we saw a large chunk of seabed just sort of falling away, nothing attached to the roll bar. And then the anchor took off on another drag. In that particular one, it wasn't even a hard yank. I just was simply backing down on the anchor. So I'm not quite done with anchors yet, but I'm going to table this project. I've got some ideas to further modify the anchor, but like I say, I'm going to leave it be for now. And as other anchors come my way, I will test those. And then also as the summertime boating season comes on here, I'll head north and maybe I'll find different waters with more interesting seabeds. And like I say, when something interesting comes along, I'll post it. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.